Dude, I'm going crazy.
They store it all on the client. I would have probably realized how big of a project this is and just abandoned it.
So with the help of my amazing brain and GPT, we now have all of these different rules and an object that is fully typed. Now we're recursively generating CSS for all elements. I'm so deep in this that there's no turning back. I'm trying to build the core product that this company has spent years building in 1 week. I am on my Shopify store. If I click Command R, I'm gonna refresh it and look at that. We're here, we're in Poland. I'm trying to architect a database schema that makes sense for what we're building so that we can also build on top of it in the future. And likely, no matter what assumption you make now, you're gonna make mistakes. I think I have something I like now. We're gonna go with this sort of schema, and then over time, we're gonna change it. Dude, this shit is like, I'm going crazy. AMP is so incredibly complex. They have built out everything. Everything else was difficult, but in their own way. Like, I haven't even touched the rendering. There's so many parameters. You know how I said in episode 2 how like you start to question, can you really do this? Like, these are the moments where you start to question, like, is this worth my time? I'm so deep in this that there's no turning back. Honestly, this whole schema thing is really challenging. If I do solve it, I will solve it. The question is more so, do I solve it by going my own direction, or do I solve it by doing what AMP is doing? So far, all of my code is custom. I've been taking inspiration from what AMP is doing, but it's my code at the end of the day, right? In my mind, I'm trying to add everything at once. Build the entirety of Facebook on the first tries. It's just not gonna work. You have to, iteratively add small parts. It's just gonna have to take the amount of time it takes because this is such a core part of the product. I can't get this wrong. I think what I'm gonna do is just figure out on my own what I think would be the best solution. I'm gonna have to think more fundamentally about it. Now I've done my research. If I run across problems, cross-check with what they're doing and figure out.
That might genuinely be the best sleep that I've ever had. I feel better than ever. I want to make sure that I have the element structure in place. So that would be buttons, text elements, images. We need to render those elements onto the page as well.
Brother, at this point, I have to start a restaurant, dude. Like, time for the ginger shot. It's too easy. It's too easy. I had this assumption that I could take the styles that we're creating through the UI and we're going to use the exact same one on the element. The issue is we can't do that for styles that are, for example, hovering or active styles, because you can't do that in React. And there's no way to put in active or hover states right here. You have to create a class and have the states in CSS. So what we probably have to do is, instead of passing styles down, recursively looping through all of the elements and creating a style sheet where the ID of the element is the selector. Now, this is a big hit in the face because this is going to take even longer, but I'm getting closer. We have to generate all of the IDs on the client. So all of the elements that you're creating in the UI, they will have IDs generated to them on the fly. Essentially what the campaign creator in the UI is gonna do is it's just gonna create this big object that's, recursive with elements, whatever, and we're gonna send that to the backend or inside of a JSON field. And then whenever we request this data, we send it back and we know exactly the format because we're validating as we go along. It's gonna be the same thing with steps. The steps are also going to be client-side generated, unless I'm wrong. And my assumption now is that it's all client side, but maybe, we run into a brick wall and we have to change it. I've had a build issue for the last 2 hours, and the reason was a circular import, which means that file A is importing file B, but file B is importing file A. So there's probably an error when trying to translate that into JavaScript bundle. After so long, finally, I have something that works. So this is the step, outermost element. This is a container with these colors. That's the data structure. Big thing, right? It just recursively can have more and more elements. Now, if I refresh, requesting from the thing, and then now it popped up. But if I make it a bit bigger now, the X now has a red background. And that comes from here saying, yo, this close button that we have on small desktop and above, set the background color to be red. It comes from here. And now we can actually click it as well. Click that X and it goes away and it tracks it. Look at that. So Oh my days, this has been a pain, my friend. I'm trying to build the core product that this company has spent years building in 1 week. You understand how absurd that sounds, but I've been using the power of almighty ChatGPT alongside my impeccable brain to make progress, even when it's been tough. It's not nice, but it works. Now I have to make sure that there's, multiple steps, progress through the steps, and that we're actually rendering the campaign based on the fact that this visitor right here is supposed to see this campaign.
We can just keep an array of all the pages that they've been to in the browser without ever sending it to us. And that's really good because that solves the issue of how do we show the campaign to the right user. Hear me out. When all of the page views are in the browser, literally with 0 milliseconds, boom, this is a user that we should show it to. They store it all on the client. Man, oh, let's go. Figure this out in my sleep. That's why my dentist says that I grind in my sleep.
The config now sends back segments that are actually in the database. I am on my Shopify store. If I click Command R, it's gonna refresh it, and look at that. We got the ad. And they have the hover states that we've defined, and it respects different sizes. Now we have something that genuinely is presentable. There's so much more work that needs to be done in regards to the whole segmentation flow. And right now I'm just randomly picking a variation, but that's not really what we want to do. There has to be an algorithm.
Good morning. There's many mistakes that I've made along the way, assumptions that I've made. As I'm starting to implement it, I'm realizing, wait, this isn't really the best way to do this because this and this, or because that and that, and oh, this action should have this data type instead. Like, I'm noticing a lot of these things as I'm implementing. Always do. Just jump into it and do it. Stop trying to perfectly execute everything. Promise you, if I'd sat here and planned everything in week 1 and how everything is going to be built out, I would have probably realized how big of a project this is and just abandoned it. But when you put yourself through it and you start documenting it, you have no choice but to go through. And when you have that mentality for everything in life, no matter if you're documenting it or not, you see where I'm trying to go with this, right? Persist through it. You just get it done no matter what needs to be done, and no matter how difficult it is, it needs to be done. All right, so it's 1 in the morning. Whenever someone lands on the page, we have to categorize this user. It sounds like an easy job, but there's so many rules. It just gets really confusing. So here are all the segments that the e-commerce store has defined. And this is the visitor right here. All the sort of data about the visitor that we've collected. And we were put into anonymous visitors and all visitors. This is arguably the most important part of the app. If we can't target these pop-ups, then there's no reason. I know I'm sick right now, but I'm still powering through trying to get this to work. I've landed on the e-commerce store, and if I refresh, you'll see a lot of stuff happening here. All of this right here is qualifying the visitor. Essentially everything passed, and there's now a list of campaigns and variations, and we pick a random variation and show that one. There's just one campaign, and the visitor qualified for that campaign. 4 segments, and the visitor qualified for 2 of them. Now we have an actual qualification process, and this is the part that I was really dreading because it's really complex. There's so many parts that come into play, but it's the most important part. And I know I've maybe said this multiple times now, but this is the core of the product, the specific targeting and how you can run campaigns, and sure, you're getting the email or the phone number or whatever. But the most important thing is the fact that you can target your users and say, hey, if they come from this page or from that refer, show them this campaign or show them that campaign. All right, so I've made some more progress. Now if I refresh, it pops up with this. If I refresh again, it's gonna pop up again. If I type in a random email and I press enter, it now goes to the second step and it tracks it all. If I close it, it works. And obviously there are fallback steps and things that we have to incorporate into this, but now at least we have a flow where we're capturing some data. We're not sending it back yet, but we're gonna do that. And we're able to use that for the next campaign. So now if you refresh, technically we've now inserted data. So we should now be a part of the already known visitor segment. All right, so it's 1 in the morning and I wanted to show you some progress. So the trigger config is whenever we've actually qualified the visitor to run this campaign, this is whenever it shows up. There could be multiple triggers, but one of the triggers are that you have to be on the page for essentially 5 seconds, and this applies to all devices. You could have different times depending on different devices. You can see that the trigger is 5 seconds.
and it should show up just like that. Super clean. And now if I put in this email and click submit, track the data captured. So I haven't felt the best today, but at least I've gotten some progress done. And these past few days have been a bit slower for me, but as long as we're making a little bit of progress every single day, that's the most important thing. All right, so now we actually generate dynamic form validation based on each step. So this step right here has an email that we're trying to pick up. And so now we can do validation client side, action on close and action on reload. What I've done is if you're on the last step, essentially if you close that campaign, we're gonna go to essentially step 1 again. And that's just for the sake of testing. After reloading the page, you can see that the type was remain on step. That could, for example, be end the campaign or go to another step. Like say you reload the page and you don't want it to keep staying on this big, pop-up. What you could do is create a fallback step, and whenever they close this campaign, or for example, reload the page, send them to that fallback step, which would be like a small bubble in the corner. Okay, so now I've made some more progress and we have errors working in the form. If I start typing, enter, we now have invalid email and the state that was essentially designed. And just to confirm this, on error, we want the background color to be red, and that's exactly what happened. All right, it's 3:30. It's time for me to pack my shit and go to Poland. Alright, so I finally landed in Poland, and I am currently waiting for Bink to greet me somewhere around here. I'm not sure exactly where he is, but 2 flights later, running on 0 sleep, but we're here. We're in Poland.